The gaming industry is constantly changing, evolving, growing, and moving forward. The landscape we see around us today is completely different from what it was even 10 years ago, and likely just as different from what it will be some 10 years in the future. Things like VR headsets and cloud gaming would be as unimaginable to someone from the 90s as 3D graphics would be to someone from the 80s. Such change is usually a rather gradual process, a battle of inches rather than yards, but in some cases it can happen quite suddenly. Sometimes all it needs is one game to take a flying leap forward, and suddenly the rest of the industry has to scramble to catch up. We don't just mean the games that helped to define a new genre. These are games that rewrote the rulebook, that permanently closed old doors and opened brand new ones. These are the games that changed how games are made, for better and for worse. I'm Ashton from TripleJump, and here are 10 game series that changed the industry. Number 10, Mortal Kombat. Arriving during the 90s boom period of fighting games, Mortal Kombat became an instant hit with its loud, flashy presentation, its unique graphical style featuring digitized human actors, and its over-the-top violence. Mostly the violence, really. Unparalleled success came with additional scrutiny from the public, however, and as parents and lawmakers started looking into what their children were playing, they weren't too keen on what they saw. A series of hearings were held by the United States government to discuss what they saw as objectionable content in video games, citing Mortal Kombat and the Sega CD game Night Trap as their key examples. Under threat of government oversight, video game publishers came together and established the Electronic Software Ratings Board, or ESRB, an independent organisation that would assign age ratings and content descriptors to commercially released video games. While the ESRB was restricted to North America, its formation created a ripple effect that would see similar organisations popping up in countries all over the globe, including good old PEGI. These systems are still in place and have become an intrinsic aspect of the video game market, all because a yellow ninja and a blue ninja couldn't settle their differences over a spot of tea. Number 9, StarCraft. For as long as video games have existed, competition has been a part of it. From the old days of bouncing a ball between two paddles, to the modern era of headshots and no-scopes, from fighting games to sports games to puzzle games. And yet almost nothing has had as much of an impact on the competitive gaming landscape as the humble strategy game. Before it was the world's most popular MMORPG, Warcraft was a series of competitive strategy games where two opposing sides compete to wipe out the other. Thanks to its popularity, it gave rise to a successor called StarCraft, that swapped out fantasy trappings for a sci-fi coat of paint, but otherwise was built on a similar engine. StarCraft revolutionized the strategy genre upon its release by adding new layers of complexity, such as multiple different factions with unique units and mechanics that made the game exponentially more dynamic. This additional depth and challenge helped launch the game to insane heights of popularity in South Korea, and birthed a professional esports scene that ballooned to include corporate sponsors, leagues of organised teams, and even television coverage. Today, esports is a global industry that allows skilled players from all countries to make a living doing what they do best, sitting on their butts playing video games. Number 8, Eco and Shadow of the Colossus. Video games are a lot of things to a lot of people. They're a form of entertainment, a relaxation tool, a way for people to bond, but are they art? It's been a hot-button topic among the gaming community for years now, even drawing responses from legendary film critic Roger Ebert, and one that probably goes all the way back to the industry's roots. But the conversation reached a turning point in the early 2000s, thanks to Team Eco, an internal development studio within Sony that produced two games for the PlayStation 2, Eco in 2001, and Shadow of the Colossus in 2005. Both games were lauded by critics for their atmosphere, visual splendor, and minimalist storytelling that challenged players to fill in the blanks for themselves. They became a common talking point among gamers, driving conversation about differing interpretations of the story and symbolism seen in the games. The release of Shadow of the Colossus sparked a resurgence in the debate surrounding video games as a form of art, with the works of Team Eco now seen as a major tipping point towards the acceptance of their premise. The debate still rages among some to this day, but for many gamers, the answer is a resounding yes. Number 7. The Legend of Zelda. Some games are so famous, so renowned, that they need no introduction. But I should probably give one anyway, so... The Legend of Zelda is one of the most, for lack of a better term, legendary franchises in gaming history, and you'd be hard-pressed to find someone out there who calls themselves a gamer that hasn't played at least one of them. They're consistently acclaimed, consistently best-selling, and consistently quite good fun, and it's been that way since the beginning. The Zelda series pioneered an entire action-adventure genre, and would be a direct influence on other notable franchises like Final Fantasy. It built its own lexicon of terms that are still used to describe video games to this day. Concepts like an overworld simply didn't exist before Zelda, which was arguably the first open-world game ever made. The biggest influence Zelda had wasn't seen on your television screen, but rather kept hidden inside the cartridge. The original Legend of Zelda was the first home console game to include a built-in battery for the purpose of preserving save data, an innovation that allowed for the crafting of longer, more complex games that required multiple sittings. So the next time you boot up an old save file in your favourite game, say a word of thanks to Zelda. Number 6. Halo. Ever since the genre first came to prominence, first-person shooters were considered the realm of PC gamers. The genre made some forays onto console, but the limits of a joystick were seen as inferior to the use of a keyboard and mouse for moving and aiming. When Microsoft made its entry into the console wars, they had a lot of catching up to do against Nintendo and Sony. What the Xbox really needed was a killer app, a single game that set it apart as something special. That game was, of course, none other than Blink's The Time Sweeper. Just kidding, it was Halo. It cannot be overstated how successful the original Halo was, as it got millions of fans flocking to the Xbox to play a game that otherwise would have been locked to computers, and in doing so made the gap between consoles and PC a lot smaller than it was before. Halo would change the game again with Halo 2, a game whose promise of online multiplayer was so ravenously anticipated that it convinced Microsoft they could charge players a subscription fee for the privilege. It worked, and would become the template for other companies to introduce their own paid online subscriptions. So thanks a lot for that one, Halo. Number 5. League of Legends. Free to play, live service, microtransactions, pay to win. So many of these terms show up in gaming headlines of the modern era, buzzing around our heads like a swarm of flies. But where did it all start? That can be traced back to the success of Dota, the franchise that pioneered the multiplayer online battle arena genre and inspired the future founders of Riot Games to start planning their own iteration on the idea. That project eventually became League of Legends, but it was still a long journey getting to where it is now. When the devs pitched their game to publishers, they wanted it to be sold for the low price of free. The business model of games that were free to start playing but contained optional purchases had seen some success in Asia, but was completely untested in the West and caused most publishers to balk. Ultimately, League of Legends was able to keep its promise of a free-to-play model, with the only paid aspect of the game being its premium cosmetics, and in doing so, provided a blueprint that many other developers would go on to adopt. And did it work out for Riot Games? Well, financial reports state that the game regularly makes $1 billion every year. So I'd say, yes, it did. Number 4. Minecraft. What is there to say about Minecraft that hasn't already been said? It's the best-selling video game of all time, inspired its own fan convention, heck, it's even in Smash Bros. How much higher praise can you get? While official sources cite 2011 as the year Minecraft was released, the first playable build of the game was made available in 2009. That version of the game, later dubbed Java Edition, represented an early alpha build years away from the finished product. But continual updates would be made over the following months, and the final build of the game was released 2 years later. The money made from pre-orders alone was sufficient to fund the founding of Mojang, the studio that has handled development of Minecraft ever since. As its popularity grew, Minecraft would inspire a wave of lookalikes, be used for educational purposes in the classroom, and even get its own movie. But one of its biggest ripple effects was the impact it had on indie games. As the early access release model Minecraft made successful allows small devs to solicit feedback on their projects whilst also procuring funding for their continued development. Even AAA games as big as Baldur's Gate 3 have put early access to good use, and it's all because Minecraft provided the building blocks. Number 3. Grand Theft Auto. Though indisputably one of the biggest franchises in all of gaming, with over a dozen titles across 3 different decades, Grand Theft Auto has courted more than its fair share of controversy. The public outcry about violence and harmful stereotypes within the series is as well known as the games themselves, to the point that it got not just itself, but the entire gaming industry into serious hot water. The biggest outrage the series ever sparked was probably the infamous hot coffee scandal, wherein a certain bit of naughty content was found hidden inside Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. In America, the ESRB was thoroughly criticised of rating the game as appropriate for players aged 17, prompting them to re-rate the game as restricted to adults under threat of increased government oversight. As a result, the ratings process for all games going forward was made much stricter, and the penalties for failing to include potential adult content made far more stringent. The whole debacle had a strong chilling effect on the industry as a whole, and many publishers worldwide began shying away from mature games in the face of increased media scrutiny. All this noise didn't seem to affect the Grand Theft Auto series itself too much though, as Grand Theft Auto 5 would sell like hotcakes to eventually become the fastest selling media product in history. Delicious, illegal hotcakes. Number 2. The Elder Scrolls. Renowned for their intricate lore and the massive scope of their open worlds, each installment in the Elder Scrolls series has become a defining game of its generation, from Morrowind to Skyrim. Though they're beloved by many, Elder Scrolls games are certainly not without their blemishes, as any of the countless memes about their numerous bugs can attest. But even those misgivings pale in comparison to a little something called Horse Armor DLC. Back in 2006, the concept of downloadable content as we know it today was still a fresh novelty, and no one had really quite figured it out completely yet. That was never more apparent than when Bethesda released the first add-on content for Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion, a set of cosmetic armor in which to dress your character's horse. Players and critics derided the announcement, criticising it for offering too little content at too high a price point. Despite the backlash, the DLC sold quite well, and with the release of additional content packs, Bethesda was soon making money hand over fist. Other publishers decided they wanted a slice of that lucrative pie for themselves, and within a few years, the practice of offering small in-game items for real-world money, today known as microtransactions, became the norm within the gaming industry. And we're all worse off for it now. And number 1, Ultima. There are a few names within the realms of RPGs that are spoken with the highest of reverence: Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, Sonic Chronicles, Okay, maybe not Sonic Chronicles, but one name that does deserve to be ranked among the upper echelons is Ultima. With roots going back to the halcyon days of the early 80s, Ultima was one of the originators for many of the concepts we now take for granted in the genre. Ideas like the concept of time travel, down to mechanics as basic as party-based combat, all trace their inspirations back to Ultima. But it wasn't enough to help define one genre of RPG, Ultima had to do it twice. Ultima Online, released in 1997, was a spin-off from this series that allowed for large numbers of players to play together over the internet. Commonly labelled as the first true MMORPG, heck, the term massively multiplayer online role-playing game was coined by the creator of the Ultima series. Ultima Online is credited with establishing the genre that games like World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy XIV would go on to dominate. It's tragic that Ultima hasn't seen a main series installment since the 20th century, because it deserves to be remembered for its amazing contributions to the landscape of gaming. Pour one out for the granddaddy of them all.